The world is watching. And yet, one daughter has chosen silence over presence. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, faces a decision that is shaking the royal sphere, rattling public sentiment, and leaving an 81-year-old man fighting for his life in a hospital thousands of miles away. Would you refuse to visit your dying father? Would you allow distance, pride, or past betrayals to dictate a moment so fragile it could be your last chance to show love? Meghan has. And the consequences are unfolding in real time, with heartbreak, shock, and controversy spilling into headlines around the world. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Thomas Markle's life has always been marked by extremes. From humble beginnings to being thrust into the glaring spotlight of international media, he has endured storms most people could never imagine. 2 heart attacks, a stroke, even surviving a devastating earthquake, have left him with the kind of resilience that would break many. But nothing in his life could have prepared him, or his family, for the sudden, terrifying turn of events that began with a blood clot in his lower leg. What should have been a routine medical checkup quickly escalated into a 3-hour surgical ordeal that would result in the amputation of his leg, leaving him in a critical, life-or-death situation in a hospital in Cebu, Philippines. The gravity of the situation cannot be overstated. According to Thomas Jr., his father's foot went from blue to black within hours. The flesh was dying, infection was imminent, and the doctors had no choice but to act immediately. It was either we remove the leg, or he may die, Thomas Jr. told reporters, his voice betraying the tension and urgency of the moment. Imagine, for a second, the terror of lying on an operating table knowing that your life depends on a surgeon's precision and speed, and knowing that the person you most want to see might never come. It is a scene of desperation, courage, and heartbreak rolled into one. And it is happening to someone who has always tried to live quietly, outside the glare of fame, despite his daughter's global spotlight. But the story isn't just about a medical emergency. It's about estrangement, fractured relationships, and choices that carry weight far beyond the walls of a hospital room. Meghan Markle and Thomas Markle have been estranged since 2018, a rift that has made headlines, sparked debates, and divided public opinion. They haven't spoken in years, and Thomas has reportedly never met his grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet. In a situation where many would hope for reconciliation, Meghan's continued silence has become the center of global speculation. The world is asking, why has she not reached out? What prevents her from making a phone call, sending a message, or simply being present during one of the most critical moments of her father's life? The layers of this story are complex. On one hand, there is the medical urgency, the life-and-death reality of Thomas Markle's condition. On the other, there is the emotional landscape, fraught with resentment, disappointment, and unresolved tension. Thomas Jr., acting as a spokesperson of sorts, has had to navigate these treacherous waters while ensuring his father received the care he needed. Samantha Markle, Thomas's daughter, has added her voice, describing her father's resilience and the terrifying reality he faces. His leg removed, blood clots threatening his remaining limb, and doctors warning that the next 2 to 3 days are critical. My father has been through 2 heart attacks, a stroke, and an earthquake. I hope he can pull through this, Samantha said, a statement that carries both fear and hope in equal measure. And yet, despite this crisis, Meghan remains silent. It is a silence that speaks volumes, a refusal that echoes across headlines and social media feeds. Some interpret it as a necessary boundary, a defense against past betrayals or public scrutiny. Others see it as a heartbreaking absence, a daughter choosing distance when connection could mean the world. What makes it even more poignant is that Thomas has expressed love for his daughter despite their fractured relationship. In January, he stated that he would always love Meghan, despite not agreeing with some of her choices. This is a man who, even facing unimaginable physical and emotional pain, still leaves a door open for reconciliation, a door that remains closed by the choice of the very person he wishes to see. Consider the stakes. An 81-year-old man, already weakened by previous health crises, facing not just physical pain, but the profound loneliness of knowing his daughter, the one family member he has always loved, will not be at his side. It is a scenario that tests the limits of empathy, public scrutiny, and personal boundaries. For Meghan, this moment is not just a private family matter. It is a global spectacle analyzed and debated by millions, dissected in tabloids, and discussed across news outlets worldwide. Every action, or inaction, becomes symbolic, charged with meaning far beyond the walls of a hospital room. As we enter this story, it is crucial to ask ourselves, what drives these choices? How does a daughter reconcile love with estrangement, compassion with self-preservation, and public persona with private responsibility? And for Thomas Markle, what does it mean to fight for life when the person you most wish to see refuses to appear? These questions don't have easy answers. They are uncomfortable, emotionally raw, and disturbingly human. And yet, they form the backbone of this unfolding drama. A story that is part medical emergency, part royal controversy, and part deeply personal family saga. In the coming chapters, we will explore every angle of this story. We will examine the medical journey of Thomas Markle, the day-to-day intensity of his hospitalization, the perspectives of his children, and the choices that Meghan Markle has made. We will delve into the emotional, psychological, and social implications of estrangement and silence. We will reveal the nuances behind the headlines, the contradictions between public perception and private reality, and the moments of courage, fear, and heartbreak that define this extraordinary situation. Every detail, every quote, every revelation has been included to keep you engaged, questioning, and emotionally invested. But as much as this is a story of crisis, it is also a story of suspense. For the next 48 hours in the hospital, for the decisions yet to be made, for the possibility of reconciliation or continued silence, anything can happen. The tension is palpable, the stakes are life-changing, and the outcomes remain uncertain. And just when you think you understand the story, a new twist appears, something so unexpected, so raw, that it changes everything you thought you knew. Thomas Markle's life hangs in the balance. Meghan Markle's choice looms over him like a shadow. And the world watches, waiting for a resolution that may never come, or that may shock everyone when it finally does. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started like any other day. The sun rose over the quiet streets of Rosarito, Mexico, where Thomas Markle had been living a relatively private life, far from the glare of cameras and the relentless scrutiny that comes with having a famous daughter. At 81, he had grown accustomed to a slower pace, a routine built around simple pleasures, a morning cup of coffee, checking on family, reflecting on the past. But on this particular day, everything changed. One small, almost imperceptible symptom, a twinge in his leg, a discoloration that seemed odd at first, would soon spiral into a medical emergency that would shake the Markle family and captivate the world. Thomas noticed it first thing in the morning, a faint bluish tint on his lower leg. It was subtle, almost easy to dismiss. But anyone with medical experience, or intuition born from surviving life's harshest tests, knows that subtle signs often carry the heaviest warnings. In moments like this, the mind races between denial and recognition. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, just a minor circulation issue, something that would resolve with rest. But as the hours passed, the blue darkened. The tint turned into a deep, ominous black. By midday, the pain had become sharp, throbbing, a constant reminder that something was very wrong. Thomas Jr., his son, recalls the moment vividly. I noticed the color first. It went from blue to black so fast, it was terrifying. We knew we had to act immediately. There was no hesitation, no room for doubt. In situations like this, minutes count. The first hospital they took him to was local, a small facility capable of initial scans and assessments. Doctors quickly ran ultrasounds, and the results confirmed what the family feared. A blood clot had formed in his lower leg. For the untrained eye, blood clot might sound clinical, sterile even. But for Thomas and his family, it was the beginning of a nightmare. A clot of this severity is not just painful, it can be lethal. If it breaks free, it can travel to the lungs, heart, or brain, causing catastrophic consequences. Tom was against them. The doctors at the first hospital did what they could, but it quickly became clear that the severity required a higher level of care. They recommended immediate transfer to a larger hospital in Cebu, Philippines, where surgical intervention could be performed with advanced resources. The journey to Cebu was fraught with urgency. Imagine being in the back of an ambulance or a rushed transport vehicle, with your father or loved one's life teetering on a knife's edge. Every bump, every turn, every delay could have been fatal. Thomas Jr. describes the ride as tense and silent. We didn't speak much. You don't need words in moments like that. You just hope the doctors know what they're doing. Upon arrival at the larger hospital, the situation was assessed with stark clarity. The doctors did not mince words. Thomas Markle's leg needed to be amputated below the knee. The flesh was already dying, turning black, a dangerous sign that infection, sepsis, or gangrene was imminent. The surgical team explained the options, and the choice was stark: operate immediately and remove the leg, or risk death. For Thomas, a man who had survived 2 heart attacks, a stroke, and even an earthquake, this was another battle, one he could not face alone. The decision was harrowing, but there was no alternative. The surgery would take 3 hours, a tense countdown filled with fear, hope, and uncertainty. For his family, especially Thomas Jr. and Samantha, the hours leading up to the procedure were agonizing. Waiting in hospital corridors, pacing in sterile rooms, listening to the constant beeping of monitors, each sound a reminder of the fragility of life. In these moments, time stretches, emotions fluctuate wildly, and the mind drifts between hope and despair. Yet, beyond the medical urgency, there was a deeper emotional crisis unfolding. Meghan Markle, the woman whose public life had dominated tabloids and social media, had not reached out. She had not called. She had not made contact. In moments like these, the presence of a daughter could be a source of comfort, a lifeline in the storm. But her absence was deafening, a silence that carried its own weight of judgment and speculation. Thomas Jr. describes it as one of the most painful aspects of the situation. My dad needed his family. All of it, not just me or my sister. He deserved to see his daughter, but that didn't happen. The contrast between Thomas's critical condition and Meghan's silence could not be starker. Here was a man fighting for life, bracing himself for a surgery that could change his body forever, and yet the person who had once been the center of his world, his daughter, remained absent. It was a tension that ignited global debate. Social media erupted with comments ranging from sympathy for Thomas to defenses of Meghan's privacy and boundaries. Every action or inaction became symbolic, debated across continents. While the media speculated, Thomas's children focused on the immediate reality: survival. They prepared him for surgery, held his hand, whispered words of encouragement, and prayed for the best. The 3-hour operation was not just a medical procedure. It was a crucible, testing endurance, faith, and courage. In that time, the family confronted their deepest fears. Every minute was filled with uncertainty. Would he survive the anesthesia? Would infection set in immediately afterward? Could his remaining leg withstand the strain? And yet, even as the surgery proceeded, the stakes were far from over. Doctors warned that the next 48 to 72 hours post-operation were critical. Infection, blood clots, or complications could turn what seemed like a successful surgery into a life-threatening emergency. Every passing moment was fraught with tension, and every decision mattered. Amid this chaos, the absence of Meghan Markle loomed larger than any surgical complication. The estrangement between father and daughter, the silence that had persisted for years, became intertwined with life and death in a way that few could have predicted. It was a story of resilience, but also of heartbreak. A family facing the worst of circumstances while one member remained absent, a ghost in the narrative of survival. For viewers watching this unfold, the tension is immediate. Here is a man who has faced near-death experiences before, who has survived unimaginable challenges, yet now sits at the crossroads of life and mortality. Here is a daughter whose choices are scrutinized, whose silence is louder than any words could be. And here is a family navigating the delicate line between hope and despair, fighting to hold on to one another even as circumstances threaten to tear them apart. As we move into the next chapter, we will delve into the moments that define the day of crisis, exploring Thomas Markle's thoughts, fears, and courage as he faced surgery. We will hear firsthand accounts from Thomas Jr. and Samantha, capturing the human side of medical emergencies and the emotional toll of estrangement. And we will begin to uncover the choices that Meghan Markle has made, the reasons behind her silence, and the ripple effects across a family already stretched to its limits. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment the doctors delivered the verdict, the weight of reality crashed down on Thomas Markle and his family. It wasn't just a medical procedure they were facing. It was a life-or-death decision that would change everything in a matter of hours. The leg, his lower left leg, already darkened and lifeless, had to be amputated immediately. There was no room for hesitation, no alternative path. For Thomas, a man who had survived earthquakes, heart attacks, and a stroke, this was an unfamiliar and brutal reality. A simple misstep in circulation could cost him his life. Thomas Jr. remembers the moment vividly. It was surreal. One moment you're hoping for a minor procedure, maybe some medication, and the next, the doctors are telling you, we have to remove the leg, or your father could die. You can't prepare for that mentally. The words hung in the sterile air of the hospital room like a shadow, heavy, unavoidable. There's a distinct terror in knowing that the line between life and death is measured not in days, but in minutes. For a man of 81, whose body had endured so much, the challenge was not just physical, but psychological. How do you prepare someone to lose a part of themselves while ensuring they still have the will to fight? The surgical team explained the situation in painstaking detail. The tissue in Thomas's lower leg had turned black, a visible sign that necrosis had set in. Infection risk was extremely high. Gangrene or sepsis could spread rapidly, leaving no chance for survival if they delayed. The message was clear: there was no optional course of action. The amputation wasn't just necessary, it was urgent. Every second that passed without intervention increased the odds of mortality. In the waiting room, Thomas Jr. and Samantha Markle faced their own emotional battle. They were torn between fear, hope, and guilt. Could they have noticed the symptoms earlier? Could they have persuaded their father to seek care sooner? In critical situations, family members often become secondary victims, witnesses to trauma who cannot intervene, powerless in the face of urgency. Samantha recalls pacing the hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering above, and the low hum of machines punctuating her anxiety. Every sound was amplified, she said. Every footstep, every beep, every door opening. I felt like something could go wrong at any moment. Meanwhile, Thomas Markle was being prepped for surgery. The psychological strain of such a procedure is immense. Even the bravest, most stoic individuals feel fear when faced with the reality of losing a limb. The hospital staff did what they could to reassure him, explaining anesthesia, post-operative care, and potential risks. But reassurance only goes so far when the mind grapples with the loss of a part of itself, a part that has carried memories, physical strength, and a symbol of independence for decades. And yet, even amidst this life-altering moment, one glaring absence remained: Meghan Markle. For all the media speculation, the phone calls that didn't come, the silence of a daughter who could have offered comfort, hung like a ghost over the surgery. Thomas had expressed love for her, despite past grievances. He had forgiven her for decisions he did not understand, for public statements that may have hurt him, for the estrangement that had festered over years. But now, in the most critical time of his life, that love would not be reciprocated in presence or contact. This absence is not just emotional. It has a tangible effect on family dynamics. For Thomas Jr. and Samantha, the lack of Meghan's involvement is a source of both frustration and sorrow. They are forced to hold the weight of the situation alone, to be the emotional anchors their father needs while grappling with their own feelings of abandonment. It is a heavy burden, made heavier by the knowledge that a single phone call from Meghan could alter the emotional climate entirely. As the surgery commenced, the operating room became a battlefield of precision and urgency. The surgeons worked meticulously, aware that any mistake could cost Thomas his life. 3 hours stretched on like an eternity. Outside, the family waited, clinging to hope while imagining the worst. Every passing minute was punctuated by prayers, silent or spoken, a desperate attempt to influence outcomes beyond human control. Thomas's medical condition required not only the removal of his lower leg, but careful attention to prevent complications in the remaining limb. The doctors warned that his left thigh also contained a blood clot, meaning that the risk of further amputations or life-threatening issues was very real. For an 81-year-old man, these were monumental stakes. But despite the severity, Thomas's demeanor remained stoic. He had endured trauma before, and though fear gripped him, he relied on the inner reserve that had seen him through earthquakes, heart attacks, and strokes. The operation, while technically successful, was only the first step. The next 48 to 72 hours would be critical. Infection could develop suddenly. Sepsis could claim his life without warning. The monitoring required constant vigilance, not only from medical staff, but also from family. Thomas Jr. describes the aftermath. Even after the surgery, we couldn't relax. One beep from the monitor could change everything. Every moment was tense. Every decision mattered. And yet, the narrative of survival is intertwined with deeper, more troubling questions. Why, at a moment when family presence could provide solace, had Meghan remained absent? Why had she not reached out, even with a simple message or call? These questions are not just rhetorical. They are deeply human. They echo through hospital corridors, across continents, and into the public consciousness. For many, her silence seems inconceivable. For others, it represents boundaries and personal choices, a complicated calculus of self-preservation versus familial duty. The emotional tension did not end with the surgery. Thomas's family faced the challenge of maintaining his spirit while he recovered. They had to navigate the delicate balance of providing support without creating additional stress. They monitored his vitals, ensured proper wound care, and offered reassurance that extended beyond words. An emotional scaffolding designed to help him endure the post-operative pain and the looming fear of infection. Samantha Markle reflects on these moments with raw honesty. Watching my father go through this was excruciating. I tried to be strong, to hold him up emotionally, but inside I was terrified. I couldn't imagine life without him, and I couldn't understand why Meghan wouldn't reach out. The duality of human emotion, resilience paired with vulnerability, is stark in situations like this. Thomas's physical survival is matched by a profound need for emotional connection, a need that remains unfulfilled. The surgery and immediate recovery period underscore an uncomfortable truth. Life and death decisions are never just medical. They are profoundly human, shaped by love, absence, expectation, and history. Thomas Markle's survival depends not only on skilled hands and advanced medical procedures, but also on the emotional ecosystem surrounding him. Presence matters. Support matters. And sometimes, silence is louder than any words could ever be. As we move forward in this story, the complexities deepen. The surgery is complete, but survival is far from guaranteed. The family faces post-operative challenges, potential infections, and the stark reality that another leg might be at risk. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle's continued silence looms over every moment, a shadow that influences emotions, public perception, and even the mental health of those closest to Thomas. The life-or-death decision has been made, but the consequences are just beginning. Each passing hour could bring hope or heartbreak, and the next twist, the one that would leave the world questioning choices, ethics, and the limits of estrangement, was already on the horizon. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The word estranged is heavy with unspoken pain. It carries with it years of misunderstandings, missed opportunities, and words left unsaid. For Thomas Markle, estrangement has been a shadow over the past 5 years, a quiet, invisible wedge that has driven a family apart. And now, as he fights for his life after a sudden and life-threatening medical crisis, that wedge is painfully visible. Meghan Markle, his daughter, the woman whose wedding made global headlines and whose life has been dissected under the world's microscope, remains absent. She has not reached out, not even with a simple message, to the man who gave her life, the man who still loves her despite years of distance. Estrangement did not happen overnight. It is the result of accumulated events, decisions, and disappointments. For Thomas, the relationship with Meghan began with hope and normal familial affection, but over time, the pressures of fame, public scrutiny, and disagreements about personal choices drove a wedge between them. Meghan's entry into the royal family only intensified the divide. The scrutiny was intense, the public narrative relentless, and Thomas found himself cast as a character in a story he had little control over. He expressed concerns and opinions that were often criticized or misrepresented. Over time, silence grew, and with silence, distance became permanence. Thomas Markle has not been completely cut off from his daughter emotionally. He has openly stated that he loves her, regardless of disagreements or public controversies. "I will always love her," he said in January, a statement that reveals both enduring affection and heartbreak over lost connection. Yet, love alone does not erase estrangement, and in times of crisis, the absence of reconciliation becomes acutely painful. For Thomas, the medical emergency and the amputation of his leg represents a pivotal moment, one in which reconciliation is possible but remains unfulfilled. Meanwhile, the lack of contact from Meghan has not gone unnoticed by the public. Social media platforms have become an arena for debate, with opinions split sharply. Some argue that Meghan is maintaining necessary boundaries, perhaps avoiding emotional or media complications that her father could bring. Others interpret her absence as callous, a refusal to participate in her father's life at a critical moment. The dichotomy creates tension not just for the family, but for audiences worldwide, who project expectations of filial duty onto a situation already complicated by history, fame, and public perception. Thomas Jr. and Samantha Markle, the immediate family members present, are forced to navigate this emotionally charged terrain alone. They bear the responsibility of providing support for their father, ensuring his medical needs are met, and maintaining morale. For them, Meghan's silence is more than symbolic, it is tangible. It changes the dynamics of caregiving, forcing them to shoulder burdens that might have been shared if she were present. Thomas Jr. describes this responsibility as overwhelming, yet necessary. "We had to be strong for him. There was no other choice. And yet, we couldn't ignore the fact that she was absent when he needed her most." Estrangement, in this context, is more than a personal dispute. It has become a central element of a family crisis narrative. It colors perceptions, amplifies tension, and shapes the emotional experience of everyone involved. Every conversation, every medical update, every moment in the hospital is framed by the absence of one key figure. It is a stark reminder that relationships, once fractured, can influence not only emotional well-being, but also the collective experience of survival and caregiving. The impact on Thomas's emotional state is profound. While he faces the physical trauma of surgery and recovery, he simultaneously contends with the psychological weight of his daughter's absence. Humans are social beings. Connection is a lifeline, particularly in moments of vulnerability. To confront a life-threatening situation without the presence of loved ones magnifies fear and can complicate healing. Thomas is resilient, shaped by a lifetime of challenges, yet even resilience has limits. The absence of Meghan is a constant undercurrent, an invisible yet palpable force that shapes his emotional experience. Public commentary has added another layer of complexity. In interviews, news segments, and social media commentary, Meghan's silence is dissected, theorized about, and often criticized. This external scrutiny adds pressure to an already intense internal struggle. The family must navigate their own emotions while contending with the glare of public attention, a dynamic that complicates the natural process of dealing with trauma. For Thomas, the hospital becomes both a place of healing and a stage for global observation, where personal pain is inextricably linked with public perception. Estrangement also has implications for the wider family network. Samantha Markle has spoken candidly about the strain the situation places on the family, describing the dual challenge of supporting a critically ill father while managing public narratives that question Meghan's choices. "We had to keep our focus on Dad," she explains. "But everywhere you look, people are asking why Meghan isn't here. It's like the public never lets you forget the gap, the fracture in the family." For Thomas, the irony is bitter. He has expressed unconditional love for Meghan, forgiven perceived slights, and survived countless personal crises. Yet, in a moment when reconciliation could be life-affirming, the distance remains. The estrangement transforms a medical crisis into a deeply emotional narrative, one that combines the urgency of surgery with the pain of absence, the hope of survival with the weight of unresolved family dynamics. This chapter of the story also highlights a broader social commentary, the complex interplay between fame, privacy, and familial responsibility. Meghan Markle's life as a public figure complicates what would otherwise be private family matters. Every action, or inaction, is amplified, scrutinized, and interpreted through the lens of celebrity. For the family, this adds layers of difficulty to an already harrowing experience. Decisions that might be simple in a private context become fraught with meaning and consequence. As the hospital vigil continues, Thomas's physical recovery becomes intertwined with his emotional struggle. He faces not only the physical pain of surgery and the uncertainty of future health complications, but also the psychological impact of estrangement. His children, Thomas Jr. and Samantha, provide care and support, yet they cannot fill the unique space of a parent-child relationship with Meghan. The absence of the daughter who once occupied the center of his life underscores the human cost of estrangement, a cost measured not only in emotional suffering, but in moments lost, conversations unspoken, and physical presence denied. Every moment in the hospital becomes a reminder of what is missing. Every update from the doctors, every complication, every small victory is colored by the silence of Meghan Markle. It is a silence that reverberates through the room, through the family, and through the story that the world is watching unfold. The tension is palpable, the stakes are life-altering, and the emotional intensity is unmatched. And yet, even as estrangement dominates this chapter of Thomas Markle's life, there is a glimmer of resilience, a stubborn will to survive. The surgery is behind him, but the challenges are far from over. His body must heal, his remaining limb must be protected, and the risk of infection looms. Meanwhile, the emotional landscape remains unsettled, shaped by absence, speculation, and the haunting question, will reconciliation ever come? As we move into the next chapter, the narrative shifts to the perspective of Thomas Jr., who must act as the family's anchor in a storm of medical, emotional, and social pressures. We will see firsthand the tension of waiting, the anxiety of monitoring a critically ill father, and the complex dynamics of a family navigating trauma without the presence of one of its most prominent members. The story deepens, the stakes rise, and the next revelation promises to shift everything yet again. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. In moments of crisis, families often rely on a single anchor. A person who can speak for the rest, who can translate fear into action, confusion into clarity. For the Markle family during Thomas's medical emergency, that anchor was Thomas Jr., the eldest son, familiar with both his father's personality and the intense media scrutiny surrounding Meghan Markle, stepped into a role that was as public as it was deeply personal. He became not only a caregiver and emotional support for his father, but also the family spokesperson, tasked with communicating delicate information in the midst of a highly charged and publicized situation. The moment Thomas Jr. assumed this responsibility, he faced a dual challenge: managing the medical crisis itself and navigating the unpredictable world of public attention. The family's private struggle, the life-or-death surgery, the post-operative complications, and the emotional trauma of estrangement, was now amplified by social media commentary, news outlets, and global speculation. Every statement he made was dissected for tone, intent, and accuracy. Every word carried weight, not just for the family, but for an audience eager to interpret and judge. Thomas Jr. recalls the initial hours of the crisis as surreal. It all happened so fast. One moment, we were noticing the leg turning blue, and within hours, my father was being rushed into surgery. You don't have time to process emotionally, you have to act. His role was immediate and multifaceted, arranging transportation to the hospital, coordinating with doctors, ensuring his father's comfort, and preparing the family for the harsh realities of surgery. Each of these tasks required focus and composure, even as fear and uncertainty pressed on from every direction. But Thomas Jr.'s responsibilities extended beyond logistics. He was also the emotional translator for a father whose fear and pain were compounded by the absence of his estranged daughter. Dad needed reassurance, Thomas Jr. explained. He needed to know that someone was there for him. I had to fill that gap, even knowing it wasn't the same as having Meghan with him. His words reveal a delicate balancing act. Providing comfort without overstepping, conveying optimism without masking the severity of the situation, and maintaining calm while inside. The turmoil of worry and helplessness threatened to overwhelm him. The amputation itself introduced additional layers of tension. Surgeons explained the risks with blunt clarity. The blackened tissue indicated that infection could set in immediately, and a blood clot in the left thigh further threatened the remaining limb. Thomas Jr. absorbed this information, aware that any misstep could result in catastrophic consequences. The stakes were tangible. Life and death hung on the precision of medical intervention, and he, as the family's point of contact, carried the weight of ensuring that decisions were executed flawlessly. During the operation, Thomas Jr. and Samantha Markle waited in the hospital corridors, navigating the liminal space between hope and fear. Every sound, the distant footsteps of nurses, the hum of medical equipment, the opening and closing of doors, seemed magnified. You feel every second, Thomas Jr. recalled. Time slows down when everything depends on a procedure lasting 3 hours. You cling to hope, but you can't help imagining every worst-case scenario. In these moments, the reality of human vulnerability is stark. Families in crisis experience a unique mixture of terror, hope, and helplessness, each emotion amplified by the awareness of mortality and the responsibility to act in its defense. Even as he managed the immediate crisis, Thomas Jr. had to contend with the larger emotional narrative surrounding Meghan's absence. The world was watching, and questions loomed large. Why had she not reached out? Was her silence intentional, protective, or indifferent? Could a phone call or message have alleviated some of the tension, even if only symbolically? These questions were not merely rhetorical. They were real, pressing, and painful, pressing on Thomas Jr. as he navigated both familial and public expectations. In addition to these pressures, Thomas Jr. also had to address misinterpretations and misinformation circulating in the media. Reports speculated about the reasons for estrangement, often reducing complex emotional dynamics to simplistic narratives of blame. He worked to clarify the situation, offering a careful balance: honesty about the severity of the medical emergency, acknowledgement of past family conflicts, and transparency without inflaming public controversy. His voice became a crucial instrument in managing both the personal and public dimensions of the crisis. Throughout this period, the emotional labor was immense. Thomas Jr. had to maintain a facade of strength for his father, manage Samantha's worries, and navigate the unrelenting public gaze. The hospital became a crucible for leadership, resilience, and emotional intelligence. He describes moments of quiet despair, sitting alone in the waiting room, imagining the surgery's outcome, and confronting the possibility of permanent loss. In these moments, the stark reality of human fragility is unavoidable. Families in crisis often experience this duality: action and waiting, hope and dread, presence and absence. One of the most difficult aspects for Thomas Jr. was watching his father confront the physical reality of amputation. Thomas Markle, who had endured a lifetime of personal crises, faced this surgery with bravery, but also with understandable fear and uncertainty. Thomas Jr. recalls trying to instill confidence while acknowledging the gravity of the situation. I had to be honest with him without frightening him further. It's a delicate line. You need to prepare someone for reality while keeping their spirits intact. This emotional balancing act highlights the profound human cost of medical emergencies. Survival is not only physical but also emotional, dependent on a network of support, communication, and presence. In the midst of all this, the absence of Meghan remained a central tension. Thomas Jr. had to navigate questions from the media, social media commentary, and family members alike, all while supporting his father. The estrangement was no longer abstract. It had become a tangible force shaping decisions, emotions, and perceptions. You can't ignore the fact that she wasn't there, Thomas Jr. reflected. Every moment, it was like a shadow in the room. My father needed his daughter, and she wasn't there. That's something you can't fix with words alone. Yet, despite the immense pressure, Thomas Jr.'s narrative also reveals resilience. The ability to act decisively, communicate effectively, and maintain emotional stability in the face of a life-threatening crisis is a testament to human endurance. Families often discover untapped reservoirs of strength in moments of extreme stress, drawing on love, duty, and shared history to navigate situations that might otherwise be overwhelming. Thomas Jr. also emphasizes the importance of transparency during the crisis. By speaking out, he provided clarity to a public that was watching, ensured that misinformation did not dominate the narrative, and maintained a sense of control over a situation defined by uncertainty. His statements were measured but poignant, revealing the human side of medical emergencies: fear, hope, frustration, and the enduring desire to protect and comfort a loved one. The hours following the surgery were critical. Monitoring, wound care, and vigilance against infection required constant attention. Thomas Jr. describes the post-operative period as tense and exhausting. You live each minute, watching the monitors, checking on him, making sure the doctors have everything they need. You're constantly on edge because you know how quickly things can change. This period underscores a fundamental truth about human vulnerability. Survival is never guaranteed, and the presence of family, even in small ways, can profoundly influence emotional resilience and recovery. Through his role, Thomas Jr. became a bridge between his father's immediate needs and the broader world. He navigated medical decisions, emotional turbulence, and media scrutiny simultaneously, embodying the dual responsibilities of caregiving and representation. The stakes were immense. A single misstep could have cascading consequences for both his father's health and the family's emotional well-being. As the story moves forward, the focus will expand to explore the hospital environment itself. The intensity of post-operative care, the delicate monitoring of infection risk, and the emotional highs and lows of recovery. The narrative will also continue to address Meghan Markle's absence, examining the implications of estrangement and the complex emotional landscape created by silence. This chapter sets the stage for understanding the profound pressures on both caregivers and patients, highlighting the human cost of medical emergencies when compounded by family conflict. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The news of Thomas Markle's amputation spread like wildfire, igniting a storm of shock, sympathy, and speculation. For the public, it was more than a medical update. It was a visceral story of life, death, and family drama intertwined with royalty. Headlines screamed about the Duchess of Sussex's absent response, and social media exploded with commentary ranging from empathy for Thomas to criticism of Meghan Markle. But behind the sensationalism, the truth was far more intense, personal, and harrowing than any headline could capture. The surgery itself was a complex and urgent procedure carried out in a hospital in Cebu, Philippines. Thomas Markle's lower leg had turned black due to necrosis, signaling that the tissue was dead and the risk of infection was imminent. In cases like this, timing is everything. The surgical team had to act quickly, removing the affected portion of the leg while ensuring that the amputation was precise, clean, and minimized risk to the rest of his body. Every cut, every stitch, every movement mattered. Surgeons were acutely aware that a single error could be fatal. Thomas Jr. recalls sitting outside the operating room, feeling the weight of each passing second. 3 hours felt like an eternity. Each minute was excruciating. You imagine every possible outcome. The best-case scenario, the worst-case scenario, and you have to prepare yourself for either. And still, nothing really prepares you for seeing someone you love in that vulnerable state. The anxiety in those hours was compounded by the knowledge that his father's age and pre-existing conditions made the surgery far riskier than it might have been for a younger patient. The procedure was not merely about cutting away dead tissue. It involved intricate care to protect blood flow in the remaining limb, meticulous attention to prevent infection, and constant monitoring of vital signs. Thomas Markle's previous health issues, a stroke, 2 heart attacks, made anesthesia and post-operative recovery particularly dangerous. The medical team had to balance urgency with caution, aggression with precision. Every decision carried consequences that could mean the difference between life and death. Outside the operating theater, the emotional stakes were equally high. Thomas Jr. and Samantha Markle had to maintain composure for their father while grappling with their own fear. The hospital corridors were tense, punctuated by the low hum of equipment and the distant chatter of medical staff. They relied on prayer, shared memories, and mutual support to maintain their emotional equilibrium. You try to focus on the facts, Thomas Jr. explains, but emotionally, it's overwhelming. Every heartbeat of the monitors, every sound from the oar, your mind races. Meanwhile, the public and media fixated on Meghan Markle's absence. For many, the story had become less about the surgery and more about the estrangement. Social media posts and news articles debated whether Meghan's silence was a sign of emotional detachment, self-preservation, or something else entirely. Headlines questioned morality, family loyalty, and celebrity responsibility. For Thomas Jr., this external attention added an additional layer of pressure. He had to navigate not only the immediate medical crisis, but also a narrative shaped by public perception and speculation. Despite the media frenzy, Thomas Markle's focus during the surgery was on survival and resilience. Having endured multiple health crises before, he drew on a lifetime of coping mechanisms. Yet, the reality of amputation is transformative. It is not merely a physical change, but a profound psychological shift, altering mobility, independence, and identity. For an 81-year-old man, the experience is jarring, demanding not only medical expertise, but immense emotional fortitude. The operation itself lasted 3 hours. Each moment was critical. Surgeons worked with steady precision, aware that the patient's age and health conditions amplified risk. In the post-operative phase, Thomas was closely monitored for infection, sepsis, and complications. The hospital staff took extraordinary measures to ensure cleanliness, administer medication, and check vital signs around the clock. The slightest oversight could have had catastrophic consequences. Thomas Jr. emphasizes the intensity of this period. After the surgery, the real challenge began. You can survive the operation, but the hours and days afterward are critical. Every nurse, every check, every adjustment matters. You're living minute by minute, and it's exhausting. The emotional toll of witnessing a loved one recover from such a major procedure is often underestimated. Families experience a complex mixture of relief, anxiety, hope, and trauma, navigating an unpredictable landscape where the line between optimism and despair is razor thin. Adding to the complexity was the knowledge that Meghan Markle had not made contact. For Thomas Markle, who has repeatedly expressed unconditional love for his daughter despite past disagreements, the absence was a poignant reminder of estrangement. In interviews and statements, his children described how this silence reverberated through the family, amplifying stress and emotional strain. Thomas Jr. and Samantha were left to provide comfort and reassurance, filling roles that might otherwise have been shared with Meghan. The surgery, while technically successful, marked only the beginning of recovery. Thomas faced weeks, if not months, of rehabilitation, learning to adapt to life with a missing limb and closely monitoring for further health complications. The risk of additional blood clots, infection, or even amputation of the remaining leg remained high. Every movement, every medical decision, every emotional response carried weight. The aftermath of surgery is often more grueling than the operation itself, demanding endurance, patience, and support from family and medical professionals alike. Public reaction continued to unfold in parallel. Headlines emphasized shock and drama, often oversimplifying complex emotional dynamics. Yet for the family, the experience was deeply personal and intensely real. The media's framing could not capture the intimate details. The quiet moments in hospital corridors, the whispered reassurances, the sheer exhaustion of managing both fear and hope. Thomas Jr. reflects on this dichotomy. People see the headlines, the stories, the controversy. They don't see what it's like to sit outside the OR, waiting, praying, watching your father fight for his life. That's the reality nobody talks about. The surgery that shocked the world became both a turning point and a symbol. It represented survival, resilience, and the stark reality of human vulnerability. It also highlighted the profound impact of estrangement, showing how absence can intensify suffering even in the face of medical triumph. For Thomas Markle, the operation saved his life, but it could not immediately bridge the emotional distance between him and his daughter, a gap that would continue to shape the narrative in the days and weeks that followed. As the story moves forward, the focus will shift to the post-operative period, examining the challenges of recovery, the emotional highs and lows of surviving a life-threatening event, and the ongoing implications of estrangement on both patient and family. The aftermath promises to reveal even more about resilience, the human spirit, and the consequences of choices made long before a medical crisis ever occurred. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The hours following Thomas Markle's amputation were unlike anything the family had experienced. For most people, surgery is only the beginning, a controlled environment where skill, technology, and precision dictate outcomes. But the true test of survival often comes in the days afterward, when the patient must fight infection, adapt to physical changes, and navigate the emotional fallout of a life-altering procedure. For Thomas Markle, those days were critical, not just medically, but emotionally and psychologically. Immediately after surgery, Thomas was transferred to a recovery ward where he remained under close observation. Nurses and doctors monitored his vital signs, administered antibiotics to prevent infection, and carefully assessed the condition of the remaining leg. The blackened tissue had been removed, but the threat of sepsis or gangrene remained high. A small miscalculation, a delayed dose of medication, or a subtle change in vitals could have resulted in catastrophic consequences. Thomas Jr. recalls watching the monitors obsessively, every beep and every fluctuation a reminder of how delicate life can be. "You can't take your eyes off the numbers," he said. "Every little change matters, and you live in constant tension because you know the margin for error is so thin." The first day post-surgery is always fraught with uncertainty. Pain management alone presents challenges. Thomas was in considerable discomfort, requiring precise dosing of painkillers to ensure he could remain alert without endangering his system. Sleep was minimal, interrupted by nurse visits, vitals checks, and the occasional flare of sudden pain. These early hours set the tone for recovery, a grueling test of endurance that combines physical healing with emotional resilience. But the critical days were not just about medical monitoring. They were also about facing the emotional reality of amputation. Losing a limb is a transformative experience, particularly for an elderly patient. The psychological impact is immediate and intense. Feelings of vulnerability, frustration, and anxiety can emerge, even as the body fights to heal. Thomas faced a new daily reality, adjusting to mobility challenges, considering prosthetics, and coming to terms with the permanence of this life change. "It's overwhelming," Thomas Jr. admitted. Physically, he's in pain. Emotionally, he's confronting what this means for the rest of his life. And mentally, he's trying to stay positive while everything has shifted in an instant. Complicating this recovery was the ongoing absence of Meghan Markle. While Thomas Jr. and Samantha were devoted to supporting their father, the void left by an absent daughter remained palpable. Thomas had always expressed a desire for connection, even after years of estrangement. A simple phone call, a message, or even a brief visit could have alleviated some of the emotional strain. But Meghan remained silent, a decision that reverberated through the hospital room like a ghostly presence. For Thomas, this absence was more than symbolic. It added to the weight of recovery, compounding fear and isolation with longing for familial connection. During these critical days, family dynamics were tested. Thomas Jr. and Samantha navigated caregiving responsibilities, media scrutiny, and their own emotional reactions, all while maintaining a steady presence for their father. They coordinated with medical staff, managed medications, and facilitated mobility exercises, ensuring that Thomas's recovery remained on track. Yet the emotional labor was immense. "You try to stay strong," Thomas Jr. explained, "but the tension never leaves. You live each day minute by minute, balancing hope and fear, praying that the next set of vital signs brings good news." Medical staff emphasized that infection was the greatest immediate threat. Even with antibiotics and careful monitoring, sepsis could develop suddenly. A fever, increased heart rate, or subtle changes in blood pressure could indicate life-threatening complications. These risks required constant vigilance, placing Thomas Jr. and Samantha in a heightened state of awareness that left little room for rest or distraction. Each morning brought a mix of relief and renewed anxiety, a cycle that repeated relentlessly in the days after surgery. In addition to monitoring Thomas's physical health, the family also had to navigate logistical challenges. Post-operative care for amputees requires specialized equipment, including mobility aids, compression garments, and careful wound management. Every step, every adjustment, carried both practical and psychological significance. Thomas had to confront the reality of rehabilitation while the family adapted to a new routine designed to ensure his survival. The critical days also highlighted the impact of estrangement on recovery. While Thomas Jr. and Samantha provided devoted support, the absence of Meghan underscored the emotional complexity of caregiving. Thomas's longing for his daughter was evident, even as he expressed gratitude for the care provided by his other children. Estrangement, in this context, was not an abstract concept. It had tangible effects on emotional well-being and the patient's perception of familial support. Public attention remained intense. News outlets continued to cover the story, emphasizing Meghan Markle's absence and speculating about the family dynamics at play. Social media discussions ranged from condemnation to understanding, reflecting the polarized nature of public opinion. For the family, this external scrutiny added pressure, forcing them to navigate their own grief and fear while also responding to a global audience eager for drama and judgment. Despite these challenges, Thomas Markle demonstrated remarkable resilience. His determination to survive, coupled with the support of Thomas Jr. and Samantha, allowed him to endure the critical post-operative period. Each day that passed without complications brought relief, yet the looming possibility of further medical issues remained. The recovery process is never linear, and the family understood that setbacks could occur at any moment. During these days, moments of emotional intensity were frequent. Thomas grappled with feelings of vulnerability and frustration. Thomas Jr. confronted exhaustion and worry, and Samantha balanced caregiving with her own emotional processing. Yet amidst this tension, small victories emerged: a successful physiotherapy session, a stable set of vitals, or even a brief moment of humor. These glimpses of hope provided the emotional scaffolding necessary to navigate the precarious nature of recovery. The critical days also highlighted the unpredictability of medical crises. Even with skilled surgeons, attentive nursing staff, and vigilant family members, uncertainty remained constant. Every day was a negotiation between life and death, resilience and vulnerability, hope and fear. The stakes were high, and the emotional intensity unrelenting. As we move into the next chapter, the narrative will explore the broader emotional and social consequences of estrangement, the public scrutiny surrounding Meghan Markle's absence, and the continued medical journey of Thomas Markle. The story will delve into the tension between private suffering and public spectacle, revealing the human cost of decisions made long before the crisis and the emotional complexity of surviving life-threatening events. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. In the sterile hospital corridors of Cebu, where the beeping of monitors measured life in beats per minute, there was another presence, silent, invisible, yet profoundly felt. Meghan Markle. Her absence loomed like a shadow over Thomas Markle's recovery, a constant reminder that estrangement is not merely an emotional rift, but a force that shapes reality. Even as surgeons and nurses focused on the physical act of survival, the emotional weight of a missing daughter was impossible to ignore. Thomas Markle had spent decades nurturing family bonds, raising children with love and guidance, and enduring personal trials that tested his resilience. And yet, as he faced a life-altering surgery and the uncertainty of post-operative recovery, the daughter who once held a central place in his life remained absent. The emotional impact of this silence was profound. In moments when reassurance, presence, or even a simple voice could provide solace, he was met with nothing but void. Estrangement, once abstract and long-standing, had now become painfully tangible. For Thomas Jr. and Samantha, Meghan's silence complicated their caregiving roles. They had to provide emotional support not only for their father but also for themselves, all while contending with the public's intense scrutiny. Every update, every social media post, every article questioning Meghan's choices added an extra layer of pressure. The family's private pain became public drama, and they had to navigate the delicate balance between protecting their father and responding to a world eager for controversy. "It's exhausting," Thomas Jr. said. "You're constantly thinking about Dad, monitoring his recovery, and then you have the media asking questions you don't even know how to answer. And all the while, Meghan isn't here, and that absence is felt every single day." The emotional toll of estrangement in the context of medical crisis is often underestimated. When a loved one is critically ill, human beings naturally crave connection, comfort, and reassurance. The absence of a family member, especially a child in relation to a parent, creates a vacuum that cannot be filled by medical intervention alone. For Thomas Markle, each day without Meghan's contact amplified feelings of isolation, vulnerability, and longing. The surgery saved his leg, but it could not replace the emotional void left by absence. Public discourse has magnified this tension. Headlines framed the story as a moral judgment on Meghan Markle, suggesting indifference or neglect. Social media debates range from condemning her to defending her privacy and autonomy. For the family, this scrutiny is both exhausting and intrusive. Every choice, every response, or lack thereof, is dissected. The family must balance transparency with privacy, honesty with discretion, all while maintaining focus on Thomas's recovery. Thomas's own reflections reveal a mixture of love, disappointment, and unresolved hope. Despite the estrangement, he has repeatedly stated that he will always love Meghan, emphasizing the enduring bond of parenthood. "I don't like everything she's done," he admitted in interviews, "but I will always love her." This duality, love intertwined with disappointment, highlights the complexity of human relationships, especially those strained by years of distance, public scrutiny, and personal decisions. The hospital experience intensified these emotions. Each day, Thomas Jr. and Samantha observed their father's resilience and vulnerability in tandem. Physical recovery required discipline, but emotional healing demanded something even more elusive: acknowledgement, reconciliation, and presence.